In Ecuador, National Electoral Council announced the dates for snap general elections after the dissolution of the Congress. And G7 leaders gathered in the Japanese city of Hiroshima agreed on new sanctions against Russia, aiming technology, industrial equipment, and services. And the 32nd Arab League Presidential Summit opens in Jeddah, Western Saudi Arabia, as Attendee is expected to discuss and sign draft resolutions as part of the Arab Action Plan 2023. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the south. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Thursday, Ecuador's electoral authority declared open the electoral process, with August 20th as the date set for the first round. After the Constitutional Court rejected the 6 lawsuits filed on Wednesday and Thursday against the executive decree number 741, better known as cross-death, the National Electoral Council approved the decision. The judges, appointed randomly, decided unanimously, in spite of repeated calls from different political and social sectors. The calendar suggested earlier by the president of the National Electoral Council was finally ratified. Should a second round be necessary, it will be on October 15th. On Thursday in Mexico, Tamaulipas State Health Secretary Vicente Hernandez said they are trying to locate some 400 people, including United States citizens who are potentially at risk of developing fungal meningitis after receiving medical treatment in Matamoros. The announcement came a day after the United States warned that suspected fungal meningitis infections had led to serious illnesses and even death among the U.S. residents returning from the Mexican city. Out of the 400 people being tracked down, about 80 are from the United States. Mexico is one of the world's top medical tourism destinations, largely due to the U.S. residents who cross the border for everything from dental work to cosmetic surgery and cancer treatments. In Colombia, lawmakers approved on Friday a government-backed health reform after almost 12 hours of debate. The articles referring to the position of the resources administrator of the General Social Security System and the setup of primary care centers were some of the most debated points. So far, 117 of the 139 articles of the health reform bill put forward by the executive have been approved. The executive proposes this health reform with the objective of guaranteeing primary health care with prevention and rehabilitation throughout the national territory, the construction of a network of public, private, and mixed health centers, as well as the implementation of a special labor regime that dignifies health workers. The discussion will continue on Tuesday, but the legislators who supported the reform said its approval is imminent. In Argentina, braces for a new electoral year in the midst of soaring inflation and deep social crisis. On Thursday, during an interview on local TV, Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner reiterated that the policies imposed by the IMF are at the root of the country's dire economic situation and that the agreement reached with the international entity must be renegotiated.
The main difficulty the Argentine society is facing today is closely linked to the IMF and the consequences of such interactions. There is no ideological or dogmatic position about the IMF, but rather about the consequences of the program it applies and imposes.
In the same interview, Fernández de Kirchner confirmed once again she will not run for the presidency in the upcoming elections due to the judicial persecution unleashed upon her.
There is that understanding in people, love, affection, and faith shared. But that understanding is an attribute of most. It's very clear what I say and published the other day. It's just the ratification of what I say on December 6th.
Finally, the Argentine VP stated she used to believe that the era of political violence in Argentina had been overcome, and regret this was not the case in reference to the attempt to her life on September the 1st.
That is strong. And you know, Pablo, that luckily I did not see it. I saw the famous image later countless times on TV channels, but no, I did not see it. It had an impact on me. It changed me. I had to think about security measures I had never thought about before. I thought those times were long gone. Finding out they were not was perhaps the biggest impact I suffered.
Let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news, updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Friday, G7 leaders gathered in the Japanese city of Hiroshima, agreed on new sanctions that they said will deprive Russia on the G7 technology, industrial equipment, and services. The move comes after the United States, Britain, and the European Union announced new efforts to pressure Moscow 15 months into the Russian-Ukrainian armed conflict. The bloc, which includes Britain, the United States, Japan, Canada, Germany, France, Italy, and the European Union, said it will redouble its efforts to prevent circumvention of its existing sanctions regime, including by targeted entities that transport material to the front lines. Earlier on Friday, the United States and other members announced their own measures, and a senior U.S. administration official said another 70 entities from Russia and other countries will be placed on a U.S. blacklist. For some experts, the move will actually have little impact on Russia.
Restrict trade in Russian diamonds. Russian diamonds are not forever, and we lay out openly and frankly why these sanctions are necessary and justified. Russian propaganda is built on lies and conspiracy. We are fighting back with the facts and figures. Imagine, but there are two debates. On the one hand, we have the debate here in the G7, and you know that in parallel there is a debate for an 11th package of sanctions on the EU side, and we will make sure that there is a coherent approach, the G7 on the one hand, and what you are doing at the EU level on the other hand.
And as the G7 summit began on Friday, Hiroshima citizens met the leaders of the alliance with strong protests. In the streets, thousands have rejected the presence of G7 leaders with banners and warmongers, imperialists, and assassin slogans. The heads of state of the Intergovernmental Political Forum, made up of the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, and Canada, accompanied by the high representatives of the European Union, arrived with the promise of more sanctions against Russia, and confirmed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be present at the meeting from Saturday on. On Thursday, Deputy Governor for International Affairs of the Central Bank of Iran, the CBI, Mohsen Karimi, said that Russia's second-largest bank, the VTB, plans to set up a representative office in Tehran. The VTB, which is the Russian bank with the largest number of foreign branches, has been seeking to strengthen cooperation with its Iranian counterparts since months ago. Both countries have recently expanded bilateral political and economic relations, particularly in the banking sector, to counter the U.S. arbitrary sanctions. Iran had requested Russia's central bank to name a bank as the agent for cooperation between the two countries' central banks as the bilateral financial activities were increasing. Karimi also said that he hoped that other Russian banks would follow suit in the opening of representative offices and branches. On Friday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov received his Armenian and Azerbaijani counterparts for trilateral talks in Moscow. The foreign ministers' meeting discussed the implementation of trilateral agreements, including the reparation of a peace deal between Baku and Yerevan, the delimitation of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, the opening of transport communications in the South Caucasus, establishing relations with the public, experts, and parliamentarians. The meeting comes ahead of next week's Russia-mediated talks in Moscow, which the leaders of the two countries are expected to attend at a time of heightened tensions over the disputed Nagorno Nagorno-Karabakh region. The Russian-mediated talks will take place amid tensions between the two Caucasus neighbors who have fought two wars over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh territory. Now we move on to other topics. In Spain, in the region of Extremadura, hundreds of people and several aerial means have been fighting forest fires, while more than half of a dozen people have been evacuated as a preventive measure. The National Security Directorate reported that the evolution of the flames is unfavorable, while warning that adverse weather conditions will continue in the coming hours. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said on Twitter on Thursday that he is following the evolution of the fire very closely. Begoña García, Extremadura's Minister of Agriculture, indicated that the fire will have been intentional. According to the military emergency unit, between 1,000 and 1,500 hectares have been burned. When summer is not yet here, a favorable time for forest fire, Spain has already suffered several outbreaks. And a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck the South Pacific on Friday, the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, reported, triggering a tsunami warning for nearby nations, including Vanuatu, Fiji, and Kiribati. Tsunami waves reaching up to 1 meter are possible along some coasts of Vanuatu, according to the U.S. National Tsunami Warning Center, downgrading an earlier assessment that said waves could be 3 meters high. Smaller waves below 0.3 meters could be expected in Fiji, Kiribati, and New Zealand's remote Kermadec Islands. The warning center also said, according to the USGS, the South Pacific is one of the most seismically active areas of the world because due to high rates of convergence of the Australia and Pacific tectonic plates that are constantly pushing against each other, and added the earthquake had a depth of 38 kilometers or 23 miles. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Friday, the city of Jeddah, Western Saudi Arabia, hosts the 32nd Arab League Presidential Summit, as member nations will discuss 32 draft resolutions as part of the Arab Action Plan 2023. The summit comes as part of the effort of the regional leaders to solve problems and internal crises, starting from the Palestinian issue, the Syrian file, through the Sudanese crisis, and other conflicts in Yemen, Libya, and Lebanon. For this reason, the presence of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, for the first time in 12 years after his country's membership in the Arab League was suspended in 2011, is of great relevance. According to the organizing team, international issues will be high on the agenda, especially the conflict in Ukraine, whose president made a brief appearance in Jeddah. On Friday, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad met Tunisian President Kais Saied on the sidelines at the Arab Summit, which got underway in the Saudi city of Jeddah. At the meeting, the two presidents discussed bilateral relations and cooperation. Al-Assad welcomed the resumption of normal relations with Tunisia, which is a necessity not only from the political and economic standpoints, but also regarding cultural, intellectual, and people-to-people issues. Al-Assad said Syria and Tunisia stand together against an ideology fostered from abroad, which associates Arab with obscurantism. Al-Assad said that all Arab countries are one nation alike, which is a unique feature in today's world. On his part, the Tunisian president recalled that many Tunisians moved to Syria during the French colonial period, that his country is glad to see the serious progress in its fight against terrorism. In the framework of the 32nd Arab League Presidential Summit, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad called for non-interference in internal affairs and thanked the Arab League for proposing Syria's return to the organization after more than a decade of suspension.
It is important to leave internal affairs to the country's people as they are best able to manage their own affairs. I thank the Saudi king for the great role he played and the intense effort he exerted to promote reconciliation in our region and for making this summit a successful one.
On Friday, Chinese local media highlights that the President Xi Jinping has outlined the main lines of cooperation between his nation and Central Asia during the summit with the leaders of 5 nations who belong to the regional bloc. The meeting, which will end on Friday, was attended by Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President of Kazakhstan, Sadir Saparov, the President of Kyrgyzstan, Emomali Rahmon, the President of Tajikistan, and Serdar Berdimuhamedov and Shuvat Mirziyoyev, Presidents of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, respectively. Xi made an 8-point proposal ranging from economic cooperation to safeguarding regional peace that was overwhelmingly accepted by his Central Asian counterparts and will set a new course for the region. On Thursday, in the northern West Bank, a Palestinian flag march was held in Jenin city in refugee camp. The march was in response to the Israeli flag march in occupied Jerusalem and to Israeli attacks in the Aqsa Mosque. Demonstrators chanted pro-resistance slogans and praised a large number of Palestinian flags. Earlier on Thursday, Jewish settlers had organized their annual flag march event in occupied Jerusalem to celebrate the Israeli capture and occupation of East Jerusalem in 1967. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich took part in the march, for which Israeli police intensified their presence in Jerusalem. On Thursday, Nigeria authorities announced that more than 3,000 people have been displaced in central Nigeria after at least 85 people were killed in clashes between herders and farmers. Violence erupted on Monday with an initial death toll of 30 in several villages in Plateau State, an area that has been struggling for years with ethnic and religious tensions. According to local sources, clashes between herders and farmers often lead to raids on villagers by heavily armed gangs. Joseph Gwankat, community leader of the Mangwavul Development Association, stated that a search and rescue team discovered 85 dead bodies, and the National Emergency Management Agency stated that thousands of people had been displaced and hundreds of homes destroyed as a result of the violence.
The community is deserted. Even schools are closed, even police stations are closed, because the way the people come in, the guns they were using, it scared them. Even the security, they don't have weapons that will face them. The people come in a large number. So we don't have weapons that will defend ourselves. Only we have catapult and machete and other things like local hunting rifle.
And in Cuba, it is remembered on Friday the death in combat of the national hero José Martí in Dos Rios in 1895 during the so-called Necessary War that took place between 1895 and 1898. That war was organized by Martí as the maxim figure and founder of the Cuban Revolutionary Party. On the morning of May 19, 1895, Martí, also known as the Apostle of Independence, was killed in the plains of Dos Rios during a confrontation between the forces led by General Máximo Gómez and a Spanish column of more than 800 troops. His corpse was recognized and collected by the enemy, who retreated under constant attacks by Cubans determined to recover it, and gave him burial in the nearby town of Remangananguas. The mortal remains of José Martí were finally buried in the necropolis of Santa Ifigenia in the city of Santiago de Cuba. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, as always, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.